good advice, bad advice, you got to know yourself before you ask the question. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another Bulletproof for BJJ podcast. I'm JT and I'm here with the irrepressible Joey. Are you getting bad advice for BJJ? You don't know. Is it solid or is it fake news?
You listen to this podcast?
Well,
you're getting advice, that I can tell you.
That's true, but you got to say that it's 80% banter, 20% any kind of sense of reasoning and logic. So, you know what you get yourself in for. But we did have a question from one of our paid subscribers saying, I don't know if the advice I'm getting is good or bad. I'm a white belt. I've been here, a couple months. I think it's like 2 or 3 stripe white belt. But I'm getting advice from a purple belt, and I don't know. I don't want to be, he said basically, I didn't want to be rude or disrespectful, like doubting them, but also was like, is that kosher? Does that work? And it is hard to tell if you're early in the jiu-jitsu journey, if something is solid advice or fake news. And that's the thing. It is hard to know because different people will show techniques in different ways for different reasons. So I wanted to get into this a little bit today because I have followed bad advice before. I've also given bad advice before because, simply because it worked for me doesn't mean it'll work for you.
Yeah, I think we're all guilty of that. And I guess when we're saying bad advice, are we talking there's deliberate bad advice, like misdirecting somebody?
Sure.
And then there's just you're giving advice which just actually isn't the best. You think it's great. But it's like, oh, dude, like I've been on the carnivore diet. It's great. You got to do it too.
Sure.
And you're like, bro, that's not actually good advice. I know it's your first week and you're feeling great, but Yeah. So one is deliberate, one is not. What are we thinking here? Did you allude to being misdirected by someone?
No, I'm just thinking more that someone had given me a tip because it had worked for them.
Right.
But what they didn't say was it only works on white belts. It's classic. You're talking to someone, they're like, whoa.
When they close their guard, you're going to take your elbows and you're going to dig it into the inside of that knee.
That adductor dagger technique. No, I think it's one of those things that you try and take on as much as you can. And if a higher belt offers you advice, like, wow, the light has shone down. The jiu-jitsu gods are smiling on me. But also they might be a troll. They might just be giving you.
They might be Craig Jonesing you.
They might be. and then, okay, here's a terrible piece of advice, which un-jiu-jitsu related, but I heard it at jiu-jitsu. One guy said to some guy as a joke. I was like, hang on a second. He said, oh, you got tinea? Have you ever tried pissing on your feet? It's fantastic for clearing up tinea. It's like, oh, have you got a fungal?
I've heard that pissing on is a thing.
Have you got a fungal infection? Do you want to put more bacteria in there and feed that infection? Go for it. Like, I'm pretty sure when you look at the tinea cream, it doesn't say contains urine. Like, this is not right, my friends. So let's get down into this because I think a good way to start, if you're not sure, someone gives you some advice or you ask a question, ask that question of 3 different people. So you could ask that question of a higher belt, they give you some advice, maybe ask your coach, but then also ask someone who may have tried it as well. Mm-hmm. I think it's good to get second and third opinions with anything to do with jiu-jitsu because I've been on the mat with different coaches and they've shown different details and it changed my understanding.
Yeah.
And I was like, right, that's the next step. How would you approach that, Joe?
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. I think it takes a lot of effort to do that. And for most of us, I'd love to think I'm going to do it, but I'm probably not. And it's kind of the way this thing works, right? It's like, hey, I heard this thing on a podcast and I think that's true. Or, hey, I read this book and I think that's true.
I've done some research.
Yeah, and you're like, hey, so, and so we usually just get, Rogan said this. JT and Joey said this. And you're like, you take it as gospel because whatever, you're looking for a solution.
You haven't got time to filter.
Yeah, and you trust that person. And so, if the big, strong person at jiu-jitsu that's better than you, that, looks tough and stuff, and they say, do this, you're going to be like, got it, thanks.
Thanks, big tough guy.
Yeah, and so it is a very tricky one. I totally agree that, you should go and try and pressure test that by asking a few other people.
But if you're the type of person...
we're lazy. We're lazy.
We collectively can be. But what I want to say with that, if you're the type of person who gets a bit of info and straight away you look at it, you go, I don't know about that.
If you're like the Dana Scully of the scenario.
Maybe.
Just a career skeptic.
Yeah, maybe.
I hate skeptics, by the way, but yeah, go on.
Yeah, it's not even skepticism. It's just you see something and you're like, that doesn't look right.
It's a great quality to have, by the way.
It's more curiosity.
Yeah.
And other than asking heaps of other people, here's something simpler. If you fall into the lazy bracket, which we all do from time to time, ask why they say that. That's what I generally do. If someone says, hey, every time you're here, make this grip, or every time you're here, put your elbow like that. That's cool, but just go that one step further and go, oh, why? Why do you say that? And then that might actually open up and reveal a lot more, because that's what I tend to do to try and milk. That's what I do. I milk information out of people hard. If I meet someone who's an expert, I'm like, they think they think that they may have bailed me up at a barbecue and said, hey man, I'm a PhD physicist. I'm like, oh really? Tell me
why.
Let's talk about that. Because I'm a nerd and I love mathematics and I have no life. But I will go, tell me more about that. And I go, oh, you did a PhD, amazing. All right, what did you do that in? And then I'm like, how can I just take 10 years of learning, take away? What was your key insight? Right, okay, cool, bye. See ya.
Joey, I got a topic for the next podcast.
Like
quantum
entanglement
mechanics
theory.
But yeah, I think that's a really good point there to ask why. I think I'm thinking like kind of in a similar way, but to also like kind of always keep in your mind that what worked for them isn't necessarily going to work for you.
Definitely.
So it's really good, like, because people will ask me like, hey Joey, what would you do here? And in jiu-jitsu, and I'm, as I've mentioned many times, I'm a really basic guy with jiu-jitsu, and so my response is usually pretty unexciting. I'm like, just do this, or I just like I don't have like this sick technique that I'm going to use to counter this problem you've presented me with. Sure. I'm going to do something really basic that hopefully just bypasses the issue. And dudes will be like, or people will be like, that's awesome, thanks Joey. And I'm like, but I'm thinking like, dude, you're probably going to take that information and that now is the universal solution to that problem. Like, that's just what I do.
Yeah.
Go ask someone else because they'll do something totally different.
But we're lazy, Joey. We're lazy. But that's the thing. It's okay because
I've had that situation a couple of times recently where I've come to training with some water, but I haven't had any electrolytes, and I've finished training and I've had to go to a convenience shop and buy myself some kind of sports drink, usually a Gatorade. Cost me like $7. It's small and it really doesn't contain that much of the good stuff that I'm looking for, which are the electrolytes. Sodi, on the other hand, is my partner when it comes to hydration, and I'd simply just run out of it. And it sucks because I got to go buy expensive stuff that doesn't do anywhere near as good a job. I'm super stoked that we've been restocked with the Sodi, and now I can be properly hydrated when I train jiu-jitsu. This has always been an underexplored aspect of my training, and I'm so stoked that we now have these guys in place to support us and also the listeners of the show. So if you want to be hydrated on the mats so that you can perform at your best and have the best mental clarity while training, get yourself some Sodi. Go to sodi.com.au. That's SODII.com.au. Get yourself some delicious hydration salts and use the code bulletproof15 for 15% off. Go to sodi.com.au. Get yourself hydrated.
I guess here was something I got from, what's his name? The producer with the big long white beard, Rick Rubin. He was saying if you're an artist.
We were making some music together.
Yeah, me and Rick Rubin hanging out in California. Pharrell was there. Yeah, Jimmy Iovine. It was cool. But here's the thing. It was chill. He said that when you're an artist or you do something, once you've made the thing, you have no say over what the person then does with it, right? So if someone then takes that as their personal gospel, that's not your fault, but you got to, I guess, it's not, you didn't say, hey, do this for everything, right? They just, you're just being generous. You were just trying to share, right?
Yeah, I think that's one way to look at it.
Like, yeah, definitely. But what I want to say is this is something I they say like someone, if all you've got's a hammer, then everything's a nail kind of thing. Like,
yeah.
I think it's important when it takes a bit of self-awareness, but also it takes a bit of like awareness of the person you're asking the question of. Say, what's their hammer? Like, what's their strength? If you're talking to someone who has been a powerlifter their whole lives, weighs 120 kilos, 250 pounds, whatever, and is a crush monster, maybe, I don't assume, these people can be technical too, but their hammer most likely will be something that requires strength, force, application, because that's what they're good at.
Yeah.
Whereas if someone is like a smaller, less strong, but very good at jiu-jitsu person, you could know that you're going to get a very technical answer out of them. Mm-hmm. So even before you ask your question, or if you're trying to validate the information, you'd be like, you don't even need to ask them why. You could be like, they're saying this because they're huge.
Yeah.
Oh, bro, I just hit Kimura from side. I just Big Harris that motherfucker.
Shout out Big Harris.
Big Harris. Kimura from side control.
Yeah. Figure 4 all day.
Works, right?
Yeah. I just grab the wrist, put it there, and then finish.
And so that may not work for everybody.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Look at the bias there. I mean, that's kind of why they say like it is kind of good to train around, train with people similar size to you, because a lot of the solutions then are kind of naturally more in alignment with what's going to work for you, aren't they?
Yeah, definitely. And I've seen
a cool point to make, but I can't remember.
You will. I've seen this fail. So there's a pass called the Sao Paulo pass, where you get a big deep underhook that got you in closed guard, and you put a lot of pressure on the underhook, and you turn the hips, and you kind of force the guard open. Yeah. And you pass in this way.
You're in closed guard, right?
Yeah. This is a big guy move.
Yeah.
Now, I think Lau had taught this. Before Buchecha became absolute world champion, Leo Nogueira was absolute world champion.
Leo Nogueira?
Yeah, he beat Buchecha when he won his absolute world championship.
Okay.
And he was heavyweight world champion 2 or 3 times. Big monster of a guy. And they actually used to be friends. They used to train at the same team. That team closed and they disbanded. The team disbanded. Buchecha went to Checkmat, and Leo Nogueira went to Alliance. So they were friends, but they ended up being competitors. Eventually, Buchecha beat him and went on to have his career as well. But he showed this Sao Paulo pass, and he's a big monster of a guy. And my friend, shout out, Walter Buse, he's not a huge guy. He actually was cutting weight, I think, to get under 66. He's like a 75 kilo guy. Amazing wrestler, tough guy. I think Walter was a brown belt at this time. He's black belt now. Amazing competitor. Like, Walter is one of the best competitors I've ever trained with, and an ultra tough guy. But in competition, he'd cut a bunch of weight. We went to this tournament in the middle of nowhere, and the scale was broken. So he'd been starving and all this stuff, and he wasn't thinking super clearly. We'd rehydrated. He tried to hit the Sao Paulo pass and got triangled.
Because he was a smaller guy.
Yeah, he was trying to do the body leverage, but he didn't have the torso length. He was offside, and the guy just opened his guard, whipped the leg over, swept and triangled him.
Because you're pinning that bottom knee, aren't you?
You've got a far side underhook,
yeah,
and you're turning your body, and you need to be kind of a fairly long frame human to keep the pressure and also not get swept or be off balance. It's a big commitment move.
Yeah,
and he was dehydrated, tired. All these things, not making good. And he's like, yeah, Sao Paulo pass works 100% of the time, 60% of the time. And it just didn't work for him. And I'm not saying this to throw shade because, like I said, Walter is an amazing competitor. And I think he might have won Pan Americans at Brown. He's a beast of a competitor. But he maybe took something that wasn't actually appropriate for his body, and it did not work, And so here's the thing: even though someone might be a world champion and say this works for me and I'm the best, you do have to kind of step back and go, trial and error. BJJ is so much trial and error. Even though your coach might give you very well reasoned advice and put context around it, you do have to mess with it a lot to find out if it's going to work for you.
Yeah, it's a great point. I was just thinking back, when you're early on in the piece and you show up to class, and the way higher belts often just seem so incredible, and there's a real dilemma there because and that thing is probably fading a little bit these days. Higher belts are a lot more easy to come by. It's more out in the open that hey, we're all just playing this game, and You know, like, and you go to some gyms and there's not even belts and whatever. But back in the day when we were training, it was like that hierarchy was like so significant. And on your psyche as like a white belt or even, but you looked at those high belts like, oh my God, they're like a god, you know? You get to do some sparring with like you get to do some drilling with a brown belt or something like, oh my God, don't fuck it up.
Yeah, so
this
special.
is big, yeah. And so when that comes like, yeah, man, I just eat steak, I don't eat anything. You're like, fuck yes, I have to only ever eat steak. Like there's a real imbalance as to what that information is worth coming from them. What I was going to say, I remember my point regarding the Rick Rubin thing.
Yes.
I think that comment in terms of like, yeah, you're just giving someone, you're just genuinely trying to help, and that's the thing. But I do also think as a like this coach or teacher-student relationship, when someone asks your advice and you give them advice, even though it might seem kind of insignificant to you, that can be hugely impactful on them.
Yeah.
And so I think that it's important to sort of respect that. And, you know, it's kind of why these days I have no problem with saying to someone, I don't actually know what to tell you, man. Like, I don't know what I would do from there because, to be honest, I don't have a good response for you because I know if I give someone a response, they're going to they're going to take that. Whereas if I'm like, look, I got a response, but I don't think it's a particularly good one, so let's ask somebody else.
But I hear what you're saying, but I don't know if that's necessarily the case, as in your response isn't good enough. Like, as someone who likes to say something is better than nothing, Joe, which I do not, giving them a response might be all the help they need, even if you don't value it as being great.
I mean, it might be, but I mean, I'm choosing to make that decision, right?
Sure.
As in like, bro, I don't have, my advice right now is not going to be of a standard.
Well, maybe it's just a judgment on yourself. Like,
well, it absolutely is.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is, if that person's a white belt or a blue belt and they're lost, you know, pointing them in a direction which you consider, and you're responsible with your advice. You're a coach, you know. You're not just like, nah, bro, I just blaze every day.
But that's exactly the point, right? Is because I am responsible with it. There are times where I'll be like, nah, dude, I'm gonna like point you in a direction. That guy.
Oh yeah, fair. No. I think definitely.
It's not a sorry. I got nothing to help you with. It's like, no, let's try and find that. But I don't have the solution. Let's try and find the person who does.
Fair enough. And I don't think there's anything wrong with saying, but I don't know. But I think jiu-jitsu is littered with people who are telling you, I know.
Well, and I think that that's really kind of part of the problem is that everyone knows. Like every personal trainer, every coach, every person on the mats knows. And it's like, no, not everyone knows. So people's inability to say, I don't know is kind of part of the problem of bad advice, because you just want to tell someone something and then they take that as gospel, and it's like now you've influenced them.
Yeah, but then them taking it as gospel is a reflection of their inability to discern what's right, and that's on them. Yeah, but that's a
really hard thing to do when you're fresh.
Yeah, well, be done. Like, you got to go there to come back. Like, fuck up. So, you know, go like, you've got to go and try. This was saying trial and error, right? Like, maybe that piece of advice is the thing that works for them forever. Like,
this episode is brought to you by Parry Athletics, the exclusive apparel sponsor of the Bulletproof for BJJ podcast. We've been working with these guys for quite some time now. We absolutely love the company. We love their gear, both for training and also just looking slick off the mats. They got excellent no-gi wears, shorts, t-shirts, all that cool stuff. If you want to get yourself into some Parry clothes or you want to rock the Bulletproof for BJJ exclusive merch, you got to go through Parry. Go to parryathletics.com and use the code Bulletproof20 to get 20% off your order. They ship internationally.
So obviously, with anything we give, like this is very general topic discussion, but if you can just think about jiu-jitsu or think about your thinking better, then you'll be better off in life. So if you can have more than one source of information, like it's not just your coach, perhaps it's you've got a teammate or whatever, asking a few different people, that might give you the response you want. Or maybe you're a lazy so you don't do it. Asking why, like why do you say that? That will often unpack how well the person knows that. Do you know what I mean? Because if you say to them, oh, why do you do that? And they go, I don't know, it just works, all right. What do you want from me? Like, then, okay, But if they can actually explain, look, I tried it this way, it didn't work. I tried it that way, it didn't work. And I did this, it did work. Then you're like, oh, there's some thought there, you know? And I think because we're very visual creatures, like humans, we just look at someone and go, oh, but they look so good. There was an episode of 30 Rock. This might date me a little bit, but Tina Fey's character, I forget her name, was dating a really good-looking guy. It was John Hamm.
Oh, that's the guy from not Suits.
Ad Men? No.
Yeah, Mad Men.
Mad Men,
Yeah.
right? And John Hamm is known for being like this charismatic, handsome
Also,
guy.
Top Gun Maverick.
Right. He so in this show, she's like, can't believe she's dating him because he's so good looking. But the more time she hangs out with him, she realizes he's stupid. She's like, well, how can he get away with being so stupid? Like, he does tennis lessons and stuff, but he's terrible at tennis. But everyone just takes his advice because he's really good looking.
Right.
And he like teaches tennis lessons. She's like, hey, we should play each other. And then she goes like, I'm going to beat him. And she beats him. He's like, you can't beat me. She's like, why? You suck at tennis. I'm a tennis pro. She's like, you're not. But I look so good. You know? She's like, no. And then he has her over for dinner and he makes duck à l'orange. And he makes it with like orange Gatorade. She's like, what is this? He's like, I used orange Gatorade.
All right, please talk me through the rest of the episode.
Anyway, long story short, she cracks it and just goes, the guy's not good at anything, but people just buy into the charisma and the look. And I think that oftentimes
people that look good get an advantage there.
Yeah, what we do as humans is we look at someone like, oh, their jiu-jitsu looks good, and you might, whatever, they got the right kit on or whatever. You're like, oh, they smell good. Man, they must know jiu-jitsu, you know? And it's like, not necessarily. I think it's...
I mean, this is the influencer life, right? Whittled down to they look good. I take their information as gospel.
Yeah, fashion versus function. Like I've always been that way, I guess. I always look and I go, what's the utility? How can I use this? Is it helpful? And you know, style points, whatever. You're looking good, that's great. But if you can work out if what the person is saying to you is applicable to you, then that is a key skill too. Asking questions is great, but also having enough self-awareness to go, I wonder if this will work for me or not. And just asking that question can be super valuable too. There it is, folks. Good advice, bad advice. You've got to know yourself before you ask the question.